Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, I am Blake Smith, and with me are my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. How are y'all doing?
I hate technology.
Yeah.
We've had a doozy tonight, so bear with us if shit goes
Yeah.
sideways. But hey, it's a live show. What can we say?
Right. Got some ghosts in the machine going on. So,
Shit. Yeah.
Mhm.
But how y'all doing? Doing good?
Doing
Besides
good,
the
man.
doozies?
Good. I'm doing good. I'm excited about this topic. I know you were quite knowledgeable on the demon realm, so I don't fuck with that, but I know you do. So.
That's the one thing. So I kind of wanted to crack that open, asking y'all a question, because I know we've said several times on this podcast that y'all don't mess with this. So
No.
Ryan, I'll start with you since you started off. Why is that?
Dude, it's just something I don't really particularly want to get involved in. I mean, we have come across it in the field, and if that happens, okay. But it's not something I really dip my toe in, because I've had a particularly scary experience with something like that once, and I don't necessarily want to mess around with it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Shelley?
Because I've had experiences with things that I can't explain that I would consider demonic since I was 4 years old. So I stay away from anything. And as our last trip to Yorktown proved, that they still like to come at me. And so, and again, I'm not trying to sound dramatic. It's just some very ugly things have found their way to me. So I'm not going to encourage them.
It's one of those I don't want to poke the bear things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know it's there. I know it's out there. If you do your thing, I don't want to deal with you.
See, and I delve into it from a, I guess, a perspective of protection. The better to know my enemy, I guess you could say.
That's why we have you. Yeah. You do that. I'm going to sit over here.
Be able to protect us a little bit better. I'm going to go out and say I don't know everything. I don't think anybody knows everything. Obviously, in this field, you can't be an expert. But particularly with demonic possession, it's just things that I have read and learned and taken in. And when I started this episode, I didn't realize how much I actually kind of knew off the cuff. So the writing came pretty easy, and I just had to research just a couple of things. So pretty excited. I'm going to jump right in, though.
Hell yeah.
With good old demonic possession. Well, the very words strike fear into our hearts. It's the epitome of existential dread that has haunted humanity for centuries. Throughout time and within cultures and legends, hushed stories of those overtaken by evil entities continue to terrify and bewilder us. Is it real? Can a human be inhabited by such a malevolent force? Or is it a ruse? Or is it something much worse that has clawed itself from the pits of hell? For centuries, religious institutions, paranormal investigators, and even medical professionals have grappled with the unexplainable. The Catholic Church has long recognized the phenomenon, formalizing rites of exorcism to combat what they believe to be the literal forces of evil. Meanwhile, psychologists and neurologists argue that possession is merely a tangle of dissociative identity disorder, schizophrenia, and mass hysteria. But those who have stood face to face with possession, who have witnessed unnatural strength, grotesque contortions, and voices not of this world, understand that some horrors defy explanation. A full-blown exorcism isn't instant. One must go through the 4 harrowing stages: infestation, oppression, obsession, and the final, most terrifying descent, possession itself. Each phase is a slow unraveling of the mind, an insidious erosion of the spirit, and a battle for dominance between human and inhuman. Recognizing the early warning signs is crucial, because once possession takes hold, the soul is no longer its own. This is not just history. This is not mere legend. Demonic possession continues to be reported today, raising the unsettling question: if possession is real, how many are suffering in silence at this very moment? How many are fighting unseen battles, their minds no longer their own? And the most chilling thought of all, how would you know if it was happening to you? Well, demonic possession follows a chilling progression, beginning with infestation. Subtle at first, then escalating beyond coincidence until its presence is undeniable. Infestation refers to the initial phase of a demonic possession taking root in a location. Unlike a simple haunting, which may involve the spirit of a deceased person, an infestation suggests an inhuman force or something with an agenda. It feeds on fear, manipulating the environment to unsettle and weaken those who live there. The first sign is often knocking, scratching, or disembodied whispers. Demonic entities often manifest through knocking or scratching, typically in patterns of 3, which we've heard, which is the mocking of the Holy Trinity. And paranormal investigators, I kind of believe this, and demonologists report that these unsettling signs appear on walls, floors, and even the bodies of the afflicted. Religious texts and folklore worldwide describe unseen forces making noises as a warning or a precursor to malevolent activity.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just because you receive a scratch does not necessarily mean that you are suddenly possessed, right?
No.
Let's clear that up right away. I'm going to gather, because we've all been scratched, and I mean, I don't think I'm possessed. That might be up for debate, but
I'll say
shut up, Brian.
Jury's still out on that one. Yeah, Brian, that was a really long intake of a breath, my friend.
So a question I do have for you really quick. Does someone have to invite this in first off, or can this find someone? Do they have to do a summoning, or what's the deal? Like, how does this even begin?
I will get there here in just a second.
Okay.
So, in Christian tradition, demonic entities are often said to announce their presence before escalating their influence. In European witch trials and exorcism records, it's mentioned that these unexplained noises, the scratching, tapping, and knocks, are early warnings of possession and even supernatural disturbances. So I found that kind of interesting, how Christian tradition views it one way, then these European traditions view it another way. Some believe that the knocking could be an entity attempting to entice interaction, and once acknowledged, it grows stronger and more invasive. And knocking, particularly in a rhythmic or patterned way, mimics how humans signal their presence. Obviously, think of knocking on a door.
Right.
That's why I've always said, and we've had experiences with this. Me, I know Shelly, one of your friends, has. If you hear knocking on the door, you're not expecting anybody. Take a peek outside that window first, because I've actually had them knock on my door with nobody out there.
Yeah, and my friend was sitting working, and she hears 3 knocks, bang, bang, bang on her door. She lives out in the middle of a pasture. Blake's been there. Nobody's going to sneak up on you. And she looked out the window, saw no one. And so she opens the door. And for those of you that have heard the stories about what's going on in her house, I tell her it's her fault. Shouldn't open that door.
Shouldn't open that door. You invited
Shouldn't open
it
that
in.
door. That's right.
Now, dude, I mean, I hide from the mailman if he knocks on the door. I'm not gonna fucking open the door if there's nobody standing out there.
I had a bug guy knock on my door today, and I was like, "Oh man, go away!" Like, God, you better text before you show up, or have an Amazon package or a pizza.
Yeah, I hit the floor and start crawling towards the window and looking out like this. You know, I'm like,
exactly.
I'm like, what am I hiding from? Don't knock on my door.
Well, sound requires less energy to manifest than physical disturbances, allowing the entity to manipulate fear with minimal effort. It's in these early moments, before fear takes full hold, that a person's response can determine whether the entity strengthens its grip or is driven away. Me, when it starts happening, I'm like, get the fuck out of my house. Like, just,
Right. So this suggests that these things are just kind of roaming, waiting for you to acknowledge them, right?
So there are some instances that location could, I guess, which I'll touch on here in just a little bit, that could attract malevolent entities. And if they try to make their presence known, that's why we always say, if you knock on the door of the paranormal, anything can answer. Anything can answer. You may be trying to talk to dead grandma, but something more malevolent could come forward and mimic dead grandma. And then you're like, oh, it's grandma. And then all's good and wonderful until your chairs are stacking on top of themselves upside down.
Oh, grandma used to do that all the time.
Well, another sign of infestation, which can show itself with the knocking and scratching, is the moving of objects. And this is your poltergeist activity. And it is a classic sign of early infestation because it serves several purposes for the entity. Poltergeist activity begins subtly. Misplaced objects, flickering lights, but soon escalates to very undeniable disturbances. Again, this entity feeds on fear. So using poltergeist activity to disrupt reality and make victims feel powerless. And it can start.
Okay, go ahead.
No,
I was
go
going to ask if is there an escalation in this activity, or does it just kind of happen, and once you acknowledge it, that kind of gives it permission?
Some sources that I have read say that there is like an actual escalation to the actual infestation itself. A lot, and I would say more of the majority of them basically say that all of this can be happening at once. But my personal belief, I tend to believe that the moving of objects tends to kind of fall after your knocks, your voices, maybe seeing things out of the corner of your eyes, stuff like that. Because I feel like moving objects.
So my
takes a
house
lot
is possessed,
more-
is what you're trying to say. Because
Yeah.
my imp yeah, y'all have been on the phone with me, and I've heard the knocks, and I've
Mhm.
tried to tell everything to get out of my house. I've seen shit. Ryan's been on the phone with me when I had something thrown at me.
Yep.
That came out of a room, and it came basically off of a doll that was in the far corner. There's no way that it just fell and rolled off of
Yeah.
a voodoo doll from New Orleans, Murray Laveau's museum, Murray Laveau's shop in New Orleans. And then, of course, the entity that I call my imp has literally, I've left note cards for the podcast sitting on my desk, gone to do something else, came back, and it looks like somebody threw them in the air, and they were half on the bed, half on the floor, and there was no fan on. And there were 60 note cards, and I had to put them all back in order before the podcast started. And yeah, I left 2 out. Y'all didn't know. If y'all know which one that was, you let me know.
I will say
You're
the way
great.
when I went to go write this, I will say I wrote it in a way of kind of what I believe to be the full progression, even in each single stage. So if you want to take it from that angle, I guess I put the progression of what I personally believe to take place in a demonic possession. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't know everything. It's just what I've read, learned, and watched.
Right.
So this is just kind of my idea, because my belief system is that it's got to escalate to a certain extent. Each individual thing during an infestation, between the knocking, the moving, the furniture, all the way up to like shadow people, takes a different level of energy to be able to do, in my opinion. So I think there has to be some taking of energy along the way to be able to build upon. So if you're going to kind of look at it that way, that's kind of the way that I wrote it in my mind.
Perfect.
Okay.
So this poltergeist activity can start with lights flickering, furniture slightly shifting, and which causes that doubt, that stress, that paranoia. And these are very important tools for weakening the person's mental and emotional state. It's just slowly chipping away at this point. It's nothing too drastic. It's not too crazy. It's just slowly kind of like, did I see that type stuff? And that's basically a test. How will the person react? If they dismiss it, the entity may push harder. If they react with fear, then the entity is like, hey, I'm gaining control. That's why we always kind of say, like, don't fear it. Don't run from it.
Right.
Kind of stand your ground, because
I scream at it.
Well, I mean,
Leave me alone.
It's kind of like going to a haunted attraction around Halloween. The more you show fear and the more you freak out, the more they're going to mess with you. So just you take control and be like, nah, no, get the hell out of here. We don't need this mess.
It's a flip coin, because some believe that engaging in the activity or acknowledging it and talking to it can invite it further in, or can invite further infestation as well. So it's almost kind of a catch-22. If you don't run from it, you stand it, you go, hey, knock that shit off. You are acknowledging it. You are talking to it. So it's, I don't know. I don't believe that every piece of furniture moving or anything being thrown that it's automatically leading to a possession. It's just probably some damn poltergeist. You got to remember, there's a lot of entities out there. But anyway, so kind of following that is these sudden foul odors. Is a very common sign of infestation, one that's more widely reported. And they can carry strong spiritual and symbolic significance in demonic lore. This is, I would say, if y'all are trying to keep track with escalation, this would probably come after your poltergeist activity. Many religious traditions associate demons with decay, filth, and corruption. Now, the idea is that these entities bring spiritual and physical contamination into a space, and that smell is the byproduct of their presence. Common descriptions include rotting flesh or decomposition, sulfur or burning odors, sewage or rotting eggs. Now, sulfur, exactly. We've all smelled sulfur before. There's Sulphur Creek right up the road. We call it Satan's pit when we're driving through.
The devil's asshole. Yeah, we're going
the
to
devil's
asshole Creek.
Yeah. Well, sulfur, linked to hell in Christian theology, has long been associated with the demonic presence. Exorcists report its stench intensifying during exorcisms, which is a sign of the entity's resistance. And in many spiritual traditions, foul smells represent spiritual impurity or unclean spirits. Some believe that, and so that's not tying into like the corruption, the decay, the decomposition. This is just, they're just unclean. It's inhuman, never walked this earth.
So this may be something you found in your research. Is that why like the Catholics carry the sepulcher when they go into the church, maybe to kind of make it smell better to ward off the evil spirits? Is that what's going on there?
I want to answer that, but I'm going to say that I'm not going to, because I'm not knowledgeable enough with the different artifacts of Catholicism. So I don't want to say something wrong and possibly offend any Catholics that may be out there. So that's not really quite my area of expertise. I study more the demons of it.
Yeah, gotcha.
Not necessarily the tools, I guess, or different religions and iconography and stuff like that. So that's a good question. I'll just have to look that up and figure out if I can find an answer for that.
All right.
So I would assume it probably has something to do with it, because a lot of like your holy or spiritual scents, incense, sage, myrrh, are often used to cleanse the area. So I would assume that that's some type of like cleansing of an area.
Okay.
So the smell is a primal trigger, evoking fears and nausea, which is another tool in the entity's psychological assault. This is Shelley's favorite game, is psychological warfare.
Absolutely.
Well, paranormal investigators and demonologists often note that bad smells tend to appear just before activity escalates. Some claim that the stronger the smell, the stronger the presence. And unlike a natural odor that lingers, demonic scents appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly with no trace of an earthly source. The unnatural nature of this phenomenon makes it harder to rationalize, forcing the victim to acknowledge that something's not quite right. And in some cases, these smells may even follow a person rather than being tied to a location, which basically means it's the person, it's not the house, so to speak. You want to put it in that form. Well, an infestation, I will tell you, is probably the most in-depth stage. It's got a lot of different things, not in depth as attacking wise, demonic entity attacking, but in depth is so much stuff going on. So we have a lot of different signs of infestation. Another key one of those signs is pets. Pets reacting aggressively or fearfully, often before humans notice anything. Animals sense entities before people do, growling, staring at nothing, or avoiding certain areas. Many believe demonic entities emit very high EMF, disrupting an animal's perception. Now, sudden energy shifts can disturb them by causing unexplained restlessness or anxiety, fur standing on end, sensing an unseen threat, aggression, or panic at nothing visible. And predatory animals detect the smallest movements, even in darkness. If an entity moves, they react. Think of your cat following something that's not there, stuff like that. And many
but your cat might be doing it just to be a dick.
They might be. You never know. I mean, I love animals, but come on, they're cats.
Yeah.
I'm a dog person.
If I do this, he'll get up and he'll follow me, and then I can lead him right to the food bowl that has a few little blank spaces showing. Come on, this way.
Oh no, it's Satan. No, it's Fancy Feast. Give me.
But yeah, so I mean, a lot of cultures see pets as supernatural guardians as well. So how they can react can reveal a spirit's intent. Obviously, benign, dog tail wagging, growling or avoidance, malevolent. But the entity's goal is to weaken its victims, and pets are often the first to suffer, actually. So the infestation victims report their pets falling ill for no reason, becoming depressed or refusing food, running away without cause, and even dying suddenly in very disturbing ways. So if a pet stands in an entity's way, the entity may eliminate that threat first for fear of like being, seen, I guess you could say. So fear weakens the animals, and some believe that the entities drain their energy to slowly grow stronger. Now, the final sign of infestation is typically the shadow people or the shadow figure. Shadow figure is the clearest sign of an entity gaining strength. It's no longer subtle, but it is a direct confrontation. Shadow figures are typically regarded, I don't quite agree with this, typically regarded as not human spirits. If you're seeing a shadow person in your home or around you or anything like that, I don't necessarily think that it means demonic. My belief is that is the lowest form of manifestation that can possibly take place. So it requires the least amount of energy. That's kind of my belief on it.
I'm with you on that. I mean, because we see all kinds of shadow people all the time, and you can, if the demonic is around, it definitely has a certain feel to it. You can tell.
Yeah,
it's not, if it's like just George who can't He can't manifest himself as like a solid figure. He's
Not
just peeking around the
George.
wall. You know, yeah, that's not going to be the devil.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Well, shadow figures are typically regarded as not human spirits. They are widely believed to be malevolent, non-human entities that exist to feed on fear and influence the living. That's a wide belief. I don't believe
Right.
that, but that is a wide belief.
I don't believe that either.
No.
I think that
Yeah.
sometimes that's the only way they know to communicate is look at me, I'm
Right.
here. They may not be able to talk through a spirit box or set
Mhm.
off a light or something. I mean, it does take a lot of energy to manifest.
It does.
It does.
But
it does.
that might be the only way they can do it. It's like, I'm here. I want you to see me.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I don't normally think that is an indicator of demonic activity.
Right.
Yeah. But it basically suggests the following in the infestation stages: that the entity is no longer hiding, it is testing boundaries, and it's claiming the space. So that's once you start to reach kind of that level and you have all this other stuff going on, you may want to kind of start thinking like, what the hell's going on here? What do I got? If you've got the poltergeist activity, scratches, knocks, your pets are reacting and you're seeing shadow people, that's where you want to kind of start thinking around your brain. Should I get somebody out here just to kind of take a look, ask some questions?
Right.
Maybe. Is it demonic necessarily? No. But
a quick question before you move on to the next stage is when the smells start showing up. I know in a lot of these demonic cases, you see a lot of like black flies showing up for whatever reason. Is that as part of the infestation stage, or is that like later on down the line?
So I kind of touched on this in another episode. I know that like flies, bugs, and stuff like that are widely reported in some cases with exorcism. I don't know. This is my personal belief. This is not really anywhere in text or anything like that. I don't know if that rings true with demonic cases. That is my personal belief. I think that it's something that has been expanded upon in literature and in movies through Hollywood, especially with like The Exorcist and stuff like that, through Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, and tying kind of all that together. There's a lot of cases that I've read through that have to do with quote unquote exorcism, some being true, exorcism cases, some not, that had no mention of any types of flies. There have been a handful that I have read. They were like, oh yeah, there were, flies that gathered around a window or something like that. Okay, great. Well, I had a shit ton of flies at my house, my last house. Does that mean it was possessed or I was possessed? No, I opened up the blind and there was like 80 flies on the window.
Jesus.
No, my garbage was just on the other side of that window. So there was something rotting in my garbage and they got inside and they started laying eggs. So,
well, I
have a hard time with the fly thing. Go ahead.
I went in my son's room, which happens to be the same room that something got thrown at me. There were all these flies behind the shade of the curtain, and it wasn't by any trash can. That one faces the front of the house. We don't have trash cans because we're in the country. We burn our trash. So yeah, lucky me. But that did happen, and that is still the room where I see the most stuff going on. So I'm just curious. Y'all are starting to make me think my house is haunted.
Your house is not.
My house
haunted.
may be possessed.
Your house is not possessed.
Maybe it's just me.
Well, I mean, it may be haunted. It's just not possessed. Now, these shadow figures that are reported, there's actually just a small handful of types of shadow figures that are reported in possession cases. That you have the Watcher, which stands motionless in corners. You have the moving shadow, which darts across hallways typically. Then there is the cloaked figure, which exudes this sinister authority as it resides in this location. And the one that seems to be the most feared of all is the red-eyed entity, which is often seen before the next step and further on down the line as full possession starts to take hold. Now, Ryan, to answer your question earlier, a demonic presence does need an opening, whether intentional or not. Infestations rarely begin with these dramatic events. Often a very small opening is all it takes. Most entities aren't summoned. They attach to people or places where conditions allow. And often it happens so subtly that the infestation is recognized only after it has well begun. So again, they feed on fear, grief, and trauma. So homes with history of violence or suffering can often carry a spiritual imprint, making it easier for an entity to manifest or even be attracted to said location. But in many cases of infestation, they begin after someone unknowingly invites an entity in, often while seeking answers or proof of the supernatural. Spirit communication tools can potentially open portals, allowing spirits, benign or otherwise, to enter. Provoking spirits without protection can attract something way worse. Amateur spells or seances can unknowingly invite something sinister in. And bringing in haunted or cursed objects, especially from sites of suffering, may carry attachments. Now, those examples include your haunted doll, your antique dolls, your religious artifacts, and items taken from graveyards or crime scenes. Lucky for me,
So
I have all but one of those in my house. Yay!
Yes, you do.
See, and the demons got Shelly. They'll send her back. They'll get tired of her talking in a minute and send her back.
She pops in and out of hell regularly anyway, so
she got to check on the minions real quick.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, while most infestations begin subtly, some cases involve individuals who knowingly invite dark entities into their lives. They do summoning rituals, which often invites those in. They make pacts with unseen forces, whether real or imagined, that often bind a person to something far darker. And even mocking sacred symbols is believed to invite malevolent forces, with some cases linking desecration to an increase in activity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, stopping an entity is crucial, because once it takes hold, it only grows stronger. See, I told you they'd spit her back here shortly.
There she is.
Yeah, they spit her back to us.
I must say right now on the live stream, I'm caught in a loop.
Huh, interesting.
Really?
Kick me out of the studio. Maybe that'll get me off. On the live stream, it's literally the same thing over and over and over on my side anyway.
Weird.
Okay. All right.
Maybe your house is possessed.
Maybe
It
it
might
is.
be. Maybe
See,
it's my
live
fault.
show, technical difficulties. I'll kick you from the studio. You can get back in.
Yeah, kick me. I'll jump back in.
All right. Hey, that was fun. That was the first guest or the first person I kicked out of the
studio.
Out of the studio. Well, anyway, stopping an entity early is crucial because once it takes hold, it only grows stronger. Many spiritual traditions stress that prevention is far easier than removal, which definitely is true. Common protections include your holy water, your prayers of Saint Michael or Our Father to consecrate the space, cleansing rituals with sage, palo santo, cedar, myrrh, to help dispel that negative energy, and sacred symbols around the home, your crosses, your crucifixes, your evil eye talismans, any of that kind of stuff, runes, sigils, any of that kind of stuff to kind of ward off those malevolent or negative forces, so to speak. So to give you an example of this, few hauntings are as well documented or as terrifying as the Smurl case in Pittston, Pennsylvania. Now, spanning over 15 years, their experience followed the classic stages of demonic infestation, beginning with subtle disturbances before escalating into full-blown oppression and physical attacks. In 1973, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into their modest duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, ready to start fresh. The house wasn't new, but it was comfortable, a place where they could raise their children and settle into family life. And for the first few years, everything seemed ordinary, but then the disturbances began. At first, it was small. A misplaced object, flickering lights, an unexpected chill, easy to dismiss as forgetfulness or an old house settling. But the signs of something unnatural lurking in the home grew more persistent. Knocking sounds echoed through the walls at night, steady and deliberate with no visible source. Scratching noises, like claws dragging across wood, rippled through the house, coming from inside the walls, the floors, and even from beneath the beds. Then came the smell. The house would suddenly reek of rotting flesh and sulfur, thick, suffocating, and gone just as quickly. And they searched for a cause, maybe something rotting in the vents, a dead animal trapped somewhere out of sight, but there was nothing. No explanation. The disturbances eventually escalated. Appliances turned on by themselves, radios blared at full volume in the dead of night, televisions flickered and hissed static. Furniture shifted without warning, chairs dragged across the floor, doors yanked open violently, objects disappeared and reappeared in impossible places. Their dog, normally playful, grew uneasy, staring into empty doorways, growling at something unseen. And one night, it whimpered in terror and refused to leave its hiding spot. The animal cowered, shaking violently and refused the come here's. And it was then that the figures began to appear. At first, just glances. Shadows moving where none should be, a dark mass at the edge of their vision, a figure in the hallway, vanishing the moment they looked. But soon the figure stopped disappearing. And one night, Janet woke with a sudden paralyzing awareness. Something was watching her. A dark silhouette loomed in the corner. No features, no eyes, just malice. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was waiting and watching. And then, as quickly as it had come, it was gone. But Jack saw them too, Shadowy forms standing in doorways, moving through the walls, growing bolder with each passing night. Then the voices started, low and guttural growls rumbling through the house, disembodied whispers hissing their name. And then the attacks began. At first, it was just a touch, a cold pressure on Jack's arms as he slept, and then a forceful grip around his ankles, dragging him across the bed. Hi, hello. Been there.
Oh, it sounds familiar, huh?
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
He woke gasping, struggling against invisible hands that left deep bruises on his skin. Janet wasn't spared either. Something or someone pressed down on her chest, holding her in place, crushing the air from her lungs. She could feel its breath against her ear, hear the guttural and human voice whispering things too terrible to comprehend. And the family was trapped. Desperate for help, the Smurls reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. And when the Warrens arrived, they immediately sensed something inhuman, its presence overwhelming. Now, I will say that a lot of the Warren cases, I love reading them, but a lot of them led to demonic possession. I'm just going to say that. I'm not saying that it wasn't all the signs were there, but...
Do you think it's true that whenever you go looking for a demon that you'll find a demon?
I think you can attract it, but I don't think you're going to find it every time.
Yeah.
But if that's what you seek out to find, if you walk in saying, I'm going to find the demon that's in this house, could you potentially misconstrue something that might just be a cranky spirit of something demonic? You can look for the signs.
Oh, you're saying like, okay, I see what you're saying on that.
If you go looking for a demon, aren't you going to find a demon?
I think if you have that mindset, if I'm going, hey, this is a demonic presence, then yeah, I think you could justify anything as being demonic.
Right.
So I think you could classify just about anything as demonic. Now, I'm not saying they didn't handle demonic cases. We know that they did. But I think that their numbers were a little inflated on what was actually demonic versus what was more poltergeist kind of activity and stuff.
Because to Ed, everything was a demon when they went in somewhere. So yeah.
Well, through their investigation, the Warrens determined that the Smurl home was the site of a full-scale demonic infestation. It had moved beyond simple disturbances, and it was feeding on the family's fear, growing stronger, and preparing for something worse. A priest was called in to bless the home. Holy water was sprinkled and prayers were recited. But instead of weakening, the entity grew more violent. The attacks intensified, and the shadow figures loomed larger, and the house itself seemed to pulse with rage. And by 1986, after years of torment, the Smurls underwent a full exorcism. The activity lessened, but it never truly ended. And eventually, the Smurls moved away in 1989, leaving behind the house that had tormented them for over a decade. But the memories remain. And as far as I was able to find, they didn't have anything else happen to them after they had moved out.
What about the family that moved into the home? Did they have anything else happen?
I didn't follow the family that moved into the home. I only followed the Smurls on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if left unchecked, infestation is only the beginning. What starts as unexplained noises, shadowy figures, and unsettling disturbances soon escalates into something far more sinister. When an entity gains strength, it shifts its focus from the environment to the individual, targeting the mind, body, and spirit. In this next phase, oppression, is where the true battle begins. Here, the attacks become deeply personal, designed to wear down resistance, instill fear, and break the will of the victim themselves. And once that happens, the entity moves one step closer to its ultimate goal, which is possession. Now, not as detailed as infestation, oppression is where the targeted individual begins to experience a systematic breakdown, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Unlike infestation, which is often external, strange noises, shadows, disturbances, oppression turns inward, directly targeting the victim's psyche and well-being. And oppression is designed to wear that person down. Victims report feeling a persistent sense of impending doom, as if something terrible is just around the corner. And this isn't just everyday stress. It is an all-consuming, crushing weight that lingers no matter what they do. Fatigue becomes overwhelming, draining energy even after rest. And it's nighttime that becomes the battleground. Victims often experience disturbing, sometimes recurring nightmares filled with dark figures, shadowy entities, or violent, grotesque imagery. Sleep paralysis episodes become more frequent, leaving them helpless as they sense an unseen force looming over them, sometimes whispering, sometimes pressing down on their chests as they're trying to suffocate them. Now, sleep paralysis is a phenomenon where a person wakes up but finds themselves temporarily unable to move or speak. It typically occurs during the transition between sleep and wakefulness, either when falling asleep, which is the hypnagogic sleep paralysis, or waking up, the Pompic sleep paralysis. I practice those words for y'all.
Good job.
But during this state, the body remains in REM atonia, a natural paralysis that prevents people from acting out their dreams while the mind becomes aware. So it's that phase that your body goes into so that you can safely dream. In this mismatch,
Wait, hang on.
Go ahead.
So if your mind is not doing what it's supposed to, is that where the whole night terror things come in? Because in night
Could
terrors,
be.
people usually can move.
Mhm.
I've only had 2 night terrors in my entire life, and one I was fighting somebody and I threw my fist into the headboard and I actually busted some of my knuckles, made them bleed, and I was asleep.
And like
So
I found it interesting because like yes, night terrors are mentioned in some cases of potential possession or even like crazy hauntings, but more often than not, it's sleep paralysis. Like more
Okay.
often than not, it's this sleep paralysis. It's not necessarily night terrors. It's this act of
Okay.
like, and I think that is almost like a huge psychological warfare aspect to it. Is that you're awake, you're aware, but you can't move, and there's nothing you
Can't
can do
move.
about it.
You're helpless.
Right.
Yeah. So I found it very interesting that a lot more cases involve sleep paralysis than it did like night terrors, because night terrors have been reported, but it wasn't enough for me to feel compelled to put it in here.
Okay. That's what I was
So
asking.
it was more, it was more the sleep paralysis is what was a recurring thing.
Okay.
So sleep paralysis is a well-documented sleep disorder linked to stress, disrupted sleep cycles, and even genetics. The hallucinations that often accompany it are the brain's attempt to make sense of the lingering dream imagery while still partially asleep. And many who experience sleep paralysis report intense feeling of dread, a shadowy figure watching them, or even a weight pressing down on their chests. Now that's with sleep paralysis. That's not necessarily with possession. So it's kind of showing you this difference a little bit here.
So it's almost being intentionally confusing if you know what sleep paralysis is, like, because your mind is in a state like, was it sleep paralysis? Was this something that is messing with me? I don't understand. So
Yeah.
it's more to add more confusion to what's going on with you.
Yeah. Well, some cultures believe that a malevolent entity will take advantage of this vulnerable state to torment or even oppress the victim. They believe that that is the moment where if they get strong enough that they take hold of them is during the sleep paralysis phase. But even when awake, a victim might feel an oppressive presence in the room. It's more than paranoia, though. It's a visceral, gut-wrenching certainty that someone or something is watching them. Some describe the sensation as if an unseen force is physically pressing down on their shoulders, neck, or chest, making it difficult to breathe. And so oppression doesn't just attack the body, but it erodes the mind during all of that process. A once joyful person might suddenly become withdrawn or irritable, lashing out for no apparent reason. Depression often sets in, often accompanied by intense feelings of worthlessness or self-hatred. And the bigger thing is like what starts happening kind of around them, like relationships begin to suffer as the entity manipulates emotions. They start to isolate the victim from their support system. And basically their life starts to unravel. You have this financial struggle that worsens, as well as your relationships breaking apart. And some unexplained health issues arise as well. So that's that calculated attack, which is meant to weaken their kind of resolve during this process. But the worse things get, the easier it is, the worse things get, the easier it is for the entity to maintain control. Now, this stage blurs the line between psychological distress and paranormal influence. One of the most debated aspects of demonic oppression is how closely its symptoms resemble psychological and neurological disorders, which is true. This overlap makes it difficult to determine whether someone is experiencing a supernatural attack or a severe mental health crisis. Many of the signs of oppression align with known conditions. The persistent sense of dread and fear of being watched can be explained by anxiety disorders, paranoia, or PTSD. Extreme mood swings, sudden fits of rage, or deep withdrawal from social connections often mimic symptoms of bipolar disorder or severe depression. The exhaustion that victims of oppression describe, feeling completely drained no matter how much rest they get, is a common symptom of chronic fatigue, anxiety, and depressive disorders. One of the most disturbing aspects of oppression is the presence of intrusive thoughts. So you got all that going on, plus your intrusive thoughts that start coming into play. Shelley, do you have a question?
Well, it was more about the intrusive thoughts. So it's basically these aren't yours, and this isn't your normal brain noise, for lack of a better word. It's not your everyday. So are these intrusive thoughts? Are they like?
These are your violent urges, your self-destructive
thank you.
behaviors,
Right.
and your basically like suicidal ideation.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Is it like hearing a voice, or is it like telling you to do things? Because you have to kind of be careful with that, because, like you said, that could be a sign of a mental health issue.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Well,
go get
because
checked. If you're
those
hearing that, go get checked, because you should anyway.
Right.
yeah, because those intrusive thoughts, I mean, they're linked to schizophrenia. Some can be linked to OCD or even major depression as well.
Oh
So,
crap! I have OCD. Great, I'm possessed. I knew it.
but similarly, the feeling that bad luck is compounding also happens during this. Losing a job, health issues worsening, relationships breaking apart. It's all snowballing at this point.
Right.
So but that can be explained by the stress diathesis model, which suggests that high stress creates a cycle of worsening circumstances. So it's really hard during this phase, if you're looking at it from a medical perspective versus a supernatural or paranormal perspective. Which one is it?
Right.
Is this person suffering from a severe mental health crisis, or is this person suffering from a potential or possible possession? And I think that's where the infestation comes in as well. You have to kind of look at that as well. What were you gonna say, Ryan?
Oh, no, I was going to ask. I was just going to say, it's almost like it's fueling what's happening, but it's also it's another confusion tactic for you. So you don't know what the hell's happening.
Yeah. Well, going back to the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren, two of the most well-known paranormal investigators, they encountered numerous cases where oppression was initially mistaken for mental illness. In their investigations, they noted that many victims were diagnosed with conditions like schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, yet their experiences often defied clinical explanations. And I think that's where that balance between oppression, not balance, but that combination of oppression with infestation comes into play. Not only are they feeling this, but here's what they're experiencing inside of their home. And if you can document that, then you have a little bit more credibility to back up that this could be oppression and not necessarily just a mental health crisis. But
so
the
it's
Warrens,
the collective. It's not the singular. It's a collective.
Exactly.
Got
exactly. It. Yeah. Well, the Warrens argued that oppression followed a pattern beyond psychological illness. It was that external force that sought to weaken and isolate its target before a possession could take hold. Now, Father Gabriel Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist for decades, firmly believed that demonic forces targeted the vulnerable, those who were weak, isolated, or spiritually unprotected. He performed thousands of exorcisms and documented patterns of oppression, emphasizing that his goal was to break down a person's will. Amorth often described cases where victims experienced growing aggression, unexplained physical ailments, and an overwhelming despair that left them feeling as if they were being crushed under an invisible weight. That's kind of basically his summary of a lot of the exorcisms that he did that were in the oppression phase, is all this growing aggression and physical ailments and stuff. But to him, oppression was the most dangerous stage before possession, as it allowed the entity to embed itself into a person's daily life unnoticed until it had full control. So while skeptics argue that sleep disorders, stress-induced hallucinations, or subconscious self-harm could explain some of these cases, exorcists and investigators maintain that the patterns they have seen are too deliberate to be purely psychological. The fact that similar reports arise across different cultures, different time periods, and religious backgrounds suggests that there may be more to oppression than science can explain. Take, for instance, the possession of Elizabeth Knapp. In the 17th century, Elizabeth Knapp, a 16-year-old servant in the household of Reverend Samuel Willard in Groton, Massachusetts, exhibited a series of alarming behaviors that were meticulously documented by Willard himself. This case provides a historical perspective on what was perceived as demonic oppression during that era. Elizabeth's troubling signs began in October 1671. She frequently complained of mysterious pains throughout her body, clutching at her legs, breasts, and neck, often crying about sensations of strangulation. Her emotional state was volatile. She would burst into fits of hysterical laughter, weep uncontrollably, or scream without apparent cause. These episodes escalated to vivid hallucinations where she claimed to see two figures walking around her or a man floating beside her bed. Now, as weeks passed, Elizabeth's condition worsened. She experienced violent fits, especially during the night, sometimes convulsing on the ground or attempting to throw herself into the fireplace. On one Sabbath day, her outbursts became so intense that it required the strength of 3 to 4 individuals to restrain her. She's 16. Yeah.
Wow.
During these episodes, she would shout phrases like money, money, sin and misery, misery. On November 2nd, 1671, Elizabeth confessed to Reverend Willard that she had been visited by the devil over the past 3 years. She claimed that the devil promised her material wealth, relief from labor, and worldly experiences. He allegedly presented her with a book containing blood covenants signed by other women and urged her to harm herself and others, including Willard and his family. Despite these temptations, she asserted that she resisted committing any malevolent acts. Now, throughout November, Elizabeth's fits continued, accompanied by visions of the devil and other spirits. And on November 28th, she endured a fit lasting 48 hours, after which she became catatonic until December the 8th. Upon regaining some lucidity, she confessed to succumbing to the devil's advances, allowing him into her bed. And in the following weeks, her episodes intensified. She spoke in unfamiliar deep voices, mimicked animal sounds, and exhibited behaviors that suggested to observers that the devil was speaking through her. Reverend Willard approached Elizabeth's condition with a blend of spiritual concern and a quest for understanding. He consulted medical professionals, but when no physical ailment could explain her symptoms, he concluded that her afflictions were of a diabolical nature. He noted that her convulsions and the strength she displayed during fits seemed beyond natural capabilities. However, he expressed skepticism about her claims of making a pact with the devil, citing inconsistencies in her accounts. Well, after her fits and alleged possession episodes, they peaked in late 1671 and early 1672, and her condition began to gradually improve. Reverend Willard noted that her symptoms eventually just subsided. Now, unlike more infamous possession cases that ended in exorcisms, executions, or prolonged suffering, Elizabeth's situation seemed to resolve on its own over time. And records indicate that she later married a man named Samuel Scripture and had children. She continued to live in Groton, Massachusetts, but there were no known reports of further supernatural disturbances in her life. Historians debate what exactly happened to her. Some suggest she may have suffered from a form of hysteria, epilepsy, or a psychological disorder, possibly exacerbated by the strict and oppressive Puritan environment. Others argue that she may have staged or exaggerated her symptoms either for attention or as a reaction to personal stressors. Whatever the true cause, Elizabeth Knapp's case remains one of the earliest well-documented instances of alleged demonic oppression in colonial America. That case is very interesting to me because it doesn't end the way that our normal possession cases end, in an exorcism or trying to force this entity out of her.
Right.
So I found that one kind of
I don't know. That one seems to me like it was some sort of like mental illness or some sort of, I don't know, you know, like maybe I hate to pull a phrase from the witch trials, maybe ergot poisoning or something. I don't know.
It's the ergot poisoning.
You know, something like that. Something just, I don't think that adds up to be a demonic oppression or possession. It seems more like she had some issues happening.
Yeah, it was documented as one back then, but it was 1671 too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know. Just I found that case interesting that it
interesting.
Alleviated itself, regardless if it was a mental health crisis or if it was a demonic oppression. It alleviated itself on its own over time, and she didn't have any other issues after that. So
interesting.
Well, as oppression takes hold, the victim's suffering intensifies. Thoughts no longer feel like their own, and reality really begins to blur. The entity's presence is no longer subtle. It dominates their mind, twisting their perception and pushing them further toward the brink. This marks the third stage, obsession. At this stage, the entity has gained significant influence over the victim's mind, wearing down their will and making them more vulnerable to full possession. Unlike infestation, which affects the environment, and oppression, which attacks the body and emotions, obsession is a direct assault on the victim's thoughts, perception, and consciousness. The victim becomes consumed by dark, intrusive thoughts, often violent, blasphemous, or self-destructive. These thoughts are no longer just fleeting or occasional, but relentless, making it difficult to focus on anything else. Many describe it as a voice in their head that isn't their own, whispering doubts, fears, and very horrific urges. The victim experiences intense paranoia, convinced that they are being watched or followed. They may believe they are cursed, damned, or beyond salvation at this point. This paranoia often leads to delusional thinking, where reality becomes so distorted, it makes them question what's real and what's manipulation. Blasphemous imagery, disturbing visions, or urges to harm oneself or others often invade the mind without warning. So I want to stop kind of down right here because I know that oppression and obsession sound almost the same.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to think about it is, where is the attack coming from? Because in oppression, where manipulation to outside external stuff, your relationships, your financial losses, things like that, those begin to happen during oppression. Obsession, it is all in here. It's all in your mind. It is all within the person. There is no external environment anymore. It is all taking place with them. So that's really kind of the way that you can tell the two stages apart. Because a lot of things that I read over years, it does get confusing, because like, wow, this is sounding exactly like oppression. Like, how do you know when oppression ends and obsession begins? You have to look at, where is the attack coming from?
Now, is there usually a time period that you found that maybe it switches from oppression to obsession?
Not a, I would guess you could say, documented or structured time period of like, the person's going to be in the oppression phase for this long, and then they're going to move to obsession. No, it's all kind of different. Infestation can last weeks, months, years. Oppression can do the same. It's all just depends, I guess, on the ultimate goal of the
whatever
demonic force. Yeah.
So the oppression is bad things happening. The obsession is everything is right here. Everything is bad is in your mind. You may not actually be having something bad happening in the moment, but all you can think about is that horrible thing that's about to happen. It's about to happen. It's about to happen. Wonder if at any point you can actually will yourself to have those bad things happen, manifesting unintentionally. These
manifesting
bad
it on
things to
yourself.
happen. Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecies,
Well, and that's why to me, description wise, we're not going to spend much time on this stage, because the third stage, because this stage mirrors oppression so much. You have a lot of the same things from the medical standpoint. These symptoms of obsession, they overlap with your schizophrenia, severe OCD, dissociative disorders, just as it was doing in oppression. It really just boils down to where the hell is the attack coming from? Is it your all-intrusive thoughts to do harm and malevolent acts up here, or is there other things that are happening in your life that are falling apart, like your finances, your relationships, and stuff like that? That's where you can really kind of pinpoint where somebody is in the process of a full possession. So, or they're wearing Calvin Klein. So,
but go back to an 80s commercial.
There's your laugh in the middle of obsession. It is Calvin Klein, right?
It is. Obsession, compassion, Calvin Klein.
I'm sure they're real happy we're talking about them. Yeah.
Okay, I was just making sure. But however, it is during this phase that a lot of your things, like when prayers are done, this is kind of where your aversion to religious iconography, when prayers are being performed, that a person will kind of withdraw, or symptoms will intensify. The overwhelming distress may happen if they try to enter a church or reach out to a priest. That's kind of where this starts to form, is in this obsession stage. Because they start to believe that they're beyond salvation at this point. There's no way that they can be saved. So that's why we're not spending too much time in the details of it, because the details are so similar to oppression. So everything that I said for oppression can be slid over to obsession. It's just now it's all inside in your mind and taking place within the person. So take, for instance, the case of Clara Germaina Celie, I think is her last name, Cele. She's a young woman from South Africa whose experiences in 1906 provided a compelling example of the obsession stage in demonic possession. Clara was a 16-year-old orphan residing at St. Michael's Mission in Natal, South Africa. Baptized as an infant, she was raised in the Christian faith. According to reports from that time, Clara confessed to her confessor, Father Erasmus, that she had made a pact with Satan. This act is believed to have precipitated the subsequent events. Following her confession, Clara began exhibiting behaviors that were alarming and uncharacteristic. She displayed intense discomfort and aggression when in the presence of religious items, such as crucifixes and holy water. Despite having no prior knowledge, Clara was reported to speak and understand languages unfamiliar to her, including Polish, German, French, and Norwegian. She revealed personal details and transgressions of individuals she had never met, suggesting knowledge beyond natural explanation. Witnesses recounted that Clara produced sounds described as animalistic, and her cries were said to resemble a, quote, veritable herd of wild beasts orchestrated by Satan. That's the direct quote of the sound she would make.
Wow.
On multiple occasions, Clara was observed seen levitating several feet above the ground, both in vertical and horizontal positions. And the severity of Clara's condition led the mission's authorities to seek an exorcism. Father Erasmus conducted the rite over 2 days. During the exorcism, Clara exhibited violent reactions, including attempting to strangle one of the priests with his stole. Ultimately, the exorcism was reported to be successful, and Clara was said to have been freed from the demonic influence. Now, Clara's case illustrates the profound psychological and physical disturbances that are characteristic of the obsession stage in demonic possession. Her experiences with those intrusive thoughts, aversion to sacred objects, and episodes of altered consciousness align with the symptoms typically associated with this phase. Now, while some aspects of her story may be interpreted through psychological or cultural lenses, the intensity and nature of her manifestations have led many to view her case as a classic example of demonic obsession.
Right.
So
Now that one's a bit more believable if she has knowledge of language that she didn't previously have knowledge of, and she has knowledge of people's private lives and transgressions. She's just like blurting out there. That's a bit more
knowledge of
believable.
things that you shouldn't have, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of that internal war. It goes along with that as well. So I mean, especially with those violent outbursts where she's trying to strangle one of the priests. You know,
and the levitation,
and the levitation. Yeah,
that would
speaking more about
me.
I mean, that's true. So
you start floating in the air, Blake. I'm going to grab the broom and swat you down.
Damn, I should have done something on like a hydraulic lift tonight, where I just slowly raise up as the night goes on, or
like the Undertaker. What the fuck?
you just kind of start doing this. Suddenly you're up and you're gone. It'll be fine. We'll act like you haven't already said that. So,
okay, got it. Awesome. Well, at this point in the process, the victim is barely holding on to their sense of self. Their mind is absolutely no longer their own. Their thoughts are invaded. Reality is distorted, and their will to resist is rapidly fading. Now, whether through fear, exhaustion, or sheer mental breakdown, they have become a prisoner within their own body. And once obsession takes full control, the next stage is inevitable. The entity no longer lurks in the shadows of the mind. It steps forward, taking complete dominance. What was once a battle for influence becomes a total takeover. And this is the final, most terrifying stage, possession. At this point, the entity no longer works through whispers or subtle manipulations. It has taken 100% full control. The victim is no longer themselves. Their body, voice, and even consciousness is hijacked by something else. Unlike the earlier stages where moments of lucidity remain, possession leaves little room for the person's true self to surface. The demon isn't just influencing their actions, it has become them. And that's another, because what I just described with like Clara's case, obviously that sounds like a full-blown possession. And in some cases, some people would see it as that. But the fact that she also had a little bit of remnants of herself left in there, it wasn't quite a full possession at that point. When we're saying possession, you're gone. Like it is, this entity has become you at this point. So the signs
there's
of
no
possession,
part of the person that you know yourself to be, or the other people know you to be.
Yeah.
Nothing left at all.
Yeah. And a lot of this of what I'm about to describe in this phase, a lot of us are going to know because we've seen Hollywood, we've seen documentaries, I'm sure. We watched other supernatural stuff. So this should not be a surprise to anybody of what takes place in this. Sorry, I just saw one of our comments. It says a demon comes forth. Hey, you guys. Thanks, Mike G. Miss you.
Michael Gagliano. Why would it not? You need to go back and read some of his other one. He's going to trademark an app where he's, am I possessed? And you answer some questions in the app.
Okay, yeah.
I'm saying that right now because Michael Gagliano now has it trademarked, and I will attest to it. That is his idea.
Got it. So it's kind of like a health crisis hotline that you just text or get on or whatever, and they're like, "Yeah, you're
it's possessed. An app. Am I possessed? Ding. Yeah, yes, you are.
Got it.
Okay.
Have you been puking up copious amounts of green bile? Please fill out this thing.
Somebody just asked if we talk about getting jumped a lot. If Clara's story would be considered to more of a jump. No, our definition of kind of like a jump is it's real quick. Like when you're out investigating and something happens with you and maybe you say something that you're not used to saying. or not, or you're acting in a way that your people aren't used to you acting, but it's within a short time span.
Right.
We have kind of a difference of opinion on that. I see you're taking over a little bit, but it's
more of a
temporary.
crack in the armor and not necessarily, they can't get a hold of you completely.
That's more of a spirit just wanting to be heard.
Right.
Than I think is a demonic entity that's trying to take over to full possession. So to kind of answer, I just happened to catch that comment. Sorry. But the signs of possession are as disturbing as they are unmistakable. Victims exhibit a total loss of control over their body. Their movements become erratic, unnatural, sometimes violently contorted in ways that defy human anatomy. Their voice may shift in pitch, tone, or even language, speaking fluently in tongues they have never learned, sometimes multiple at once. This phenomenon, known as xenoglossy, is one of the strongest indications that something beyond psychological illness is at play. The possessed may also demonstrate superhuman strength, far exceeding what their bodies should be capable of. Small-framed individuals have thrown grown men across the room, and of course, we just heard about Elizabeth Knapp, 16 years old, being held down by 3 to 4 individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Some have bent metal restraints meant to hold them down.
Damn.
Others levitate, their bodies lifting off the ground as if caught by unseen hands. Sacred objects and prayers provoke extreme reactions. A simple touch from a crucifix may actually leave a burn on the skin as if it was searing hot, even though it's not. Reading scripture or performing a blessing can send the possessed into convulsions, fits of rage, or bouts of laughter laced with mockery. There is an unnatural awareness of religious symbols even when hidden. The possessed individual might recoil a rosary tucked inside someone's pocket without ever even seeing it. They might react violently to the silent prayers of those in the room as if hearing them in real time. And then there's the violence. Possession is rarely passive. The entity inside wants to destroy. It may turn the victim's aggression outward, attacking family members, strangers, even religious figures attempting to help. But often, the destruction is self-inflicted. Victims claw at their own flesh, slam their bodies into walls, gouge their skin with whatever sharp objects they can find. In some cases, they stop eating or drinking altogether, wasting away as if the entity itself is consuming them from the inside. Possession also brings with it something more insidious, an awareness that it is not human. The entity knows things that it shouldn't. It reveals the deepest, darkest secrets, sometimes exposing very personal sins or traumas of those around it, even people it has never met. It calls out hidden fears with eerie precision, striking at weaknesses no one else should know. And this knowledge is not limited to the room. Many accounts describe possessed individuals predicting deaths, disasters, and events that later end up coming true. Now, whether these are real visions or twisted manipulations remains a very terrifying mystery. And despite the overwhelming evidence of possession, there is always the lingering question. Is this truly supernatural, or is it something explainable by science? Some cases dismissed as possession have later been attributed to, some cases seen as possession have later been attributed to mental illness. That's schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, extreme hysteria. But skeptics struggle to explain cases of xenoglossy, superhuman strength, or detailed premonitions. Those who have witnessed true possession insist that it is something beyond human comprehension and something that defies logic. I'm sorry, if somebody's speaking in multiple tongues from 2 different languages at the same time, go ahead and explain that one to me, Jethro.
Can't do it.
Like, get down in your little scientific journal and tell me how somebody speaks in 2 languages at the same time that are languages they don't even know. Yeah. Well, possession is not something that fades with time. It does not weaken on its own, which is why I find Elizabeth Knapp's case very interesting. Once an entity has taken full control, it will not simply leave. It is a parasite, feeding off the very essence of its host. The longer it stays, the harder it is to drive out. In some cases, the original person is buried so deeply within the possession that their soul is said to be lost entirely. And when that happens, even an exorcism may not be enough to bring them back. Now, the percentage of actual demonic possession versus false claims is difficult to determine with absolute certainty. Based on studies from religious institutions, medical professionals, and paranormal researchers, the vast majority of reported possessions are not genuine. So what is the makeup? Well, 70 to 90% of these cases are psychological or medical explanations. The majority of cases involve mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, epilepsy, Tourette syndrome, or severe trauma responses. Some cases also involve substance abuse leading to hallucinations and erratic behavior that mimic possession. 5 to 20% are cultural and religious influence. Some cases arise due to strong cultural or religious beliefs. Mass hysteria, social conditioning, and fear-based manifestations can lead to what appears to be possessions, but are actually psychological phenomena. 5 to 15% are straight up frauds, attention-seeking, or suggestions. Some claims of possessions are fabricated either for attention, financial gain, or as a way to avoid accountability for their actions. There are documented cases of people pretending to be possessed during exorcisms or using the idea of demonic control to manipulate others. So, what does that leave us? Unexplained cases or possible genuine possession make up less than 1%. A very small fraction of cases exhibit phenomena that defy medical, psychological, or scientific explanation. Those are the cases that involve the xenoglossy, the inhuman strength, the accurate premonitions. The Vatican and other religious organizations report that out of every 5 to 10,000 possession claims, that's a large gap, by the way, only a handful are considered authentic and actually require an exorcism. Now, the Catholic Church requires thorough psychological and medical evaluations before approving an exorcism to rule out mental illness. But one of the most modern and well-documented cases of a full-blown possession, complete with exorcisms and supernatural phenomena, is the Tanaku exorcism of Marica Irina Cornici in Romania. This one got me because in 2005,
Whoa.
2005,
Okay.
in the isolated town of, I believe I'm pronouncing it correct, Tanaku, Romania, a 23-year-old nun named Marica Irina Cornici was subjected to an exorcism that ended in tragedy. Her case is one of the most chilling modern accounts of possession, one that led to both criminal charges and lingering speculation over whether she was truly afflicted by something supernatural. Marica had joined the Holy Trinity Monastery in Tanaku after spending much of her youth in an orphanage. Initially, she was quiet and devout, but over time, something changed. She began experiencing violent mood swings, outbursts of aggression, and erratic behavior. She told those around her that she heard voices and that the devil was speaking to her. At times, she would burst into fits of laughter or scream uncontrollably in the middle of prayers. The other nuns believed she had been overtaken by an evil spirit, and as her behavior worsened, their suspicions grew. Marica's symptoms fit the classic stages of possession. She lashed out at those around her, including fellow nuns and the monastery's priest, Father Daniel Coragianu. Trying to get there. Coragianu. There we go.
There you go.
She screamed and convulsed when prayers were recited over her. Witnesses claimed she spoke in deep guttural tones at times, uttering things that made no sense in Romanian. She was even seen twisting her body unnaturally, injuring herself without seeming to feel any pain. Despite the monastery's isolated setting, word spread that Marica was possessed. Some suggested that she had developed schizophrenia. But Father Coragianu and the nuns believed her condition went beyond medical explanation. When she attacked fellow nuns and disrupted religious services, the monastery took drastic measures, opting for an exorcism. Father Coragianu, a devout and highly traditional priest, performed an unauthorized exorcism in an attempt to free Marica from demonic control. Now, unlike the formal Catholic rite of exorcism, which follows strict guidelines, the Tanaku exorcism was conducted in a more extreme and medieval fashion. Marica was restrained, tied to a wooden cross, and gagged for 3 days while prayers were recited over her. The belief was that binding her body would prevent the demon from using it to lash out. She was denied food and water during the ritual, which was intended to weaken the demon's hold. The nuns and the priests took turns chanting prayers, sprinkling her with holy water and commanding the entity to leave her body in the name of Christ. They reported hearing inhuman growls emanating from her throat and seeing her strength surge unnaturally before subsiding. At times, her body would convulse violently as if something was trying to break free. And after 3 days, she stopped struggling. She fell silent, limp, and unresponsive. The monastery believed they succeeded, that the demon had finally departed. But instead of recovery, Marissa Irina Korenichi was dead. When authorities arrived, they found her emaciated, dehydrated, and bound to the cross where the exorcism had taken place. The official cause of death was listed as dehydration and exhaustion, but the case quickly ignited a firestorm of controversy and fear. Father Corrigianu and the 4 nuns involved in the exorcism were arrested and convicted of manslaughter. Corrigianu received 7 years in prison, while the nuns received lesser sentences. The Orthodox Church excommunicated him and condemned the exorcism, stating that it was not performed with church approval. However, the case remains deeply unsettling for several reasons. The medical diagnosis remains very unclear. Some experts labeled her condition as schizophrenia, but there was no prior history of mental illness. Her symptoms appeared suddenly with no clear medical trigger. Witnesses insist she displayed supernatural phenomena. And the nuns who cared for her maintained that Marissa's reactions to religious items were extreme and unnatural, far beyond what a psychiatric disorder would cause. The priest, too, stood by his actions. Corrigianu, even after his conviction, insisted that Marissa was possessed and that the exorcism was a success, claiming that the demon had left her body, but it was at the cost of her life. The Tanaku exorcism remains one of the most polarizing modern cases of possession. Critics argue that it was an act of religious extremism, which was a tragic case of a mentally ill woman being subjected to an outdated and brutal ritual. And others believe something darker was at play, pointing to the inhuman strength, the aversion to the holy objects, and altered voice and evidence as evidence of true possession. Now, unlike historical cases that can be dismissed as legend, this happened in the 21st century in a modern country with medical oversight. And yet there are still no definitive answers. I find that case to be quite compelling. I gave you a very shortened version of it. If you want to know more about it, go read it. Intriguing case.
Sounds kind of like the Annalise Michael case.
It does it not? We covered her back like last year, I think, at somewhere, this year in June, or one of the years in June.
Yeah, when she was starved and she couldn't get any water. I mean, I don't know how you administer water and food to someone going through the throes of something like that, but you should probably have it on standby so they don't just die from some sort of medical aversion.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, possession, no matter how absolute, is not always the end. Some believe that with the right intervention, a soul can be reclaimed. So I'm giving you a bonus stage. The battle for control is not always lost, and for centuries, humanity has turned to one final weapon against the darkness: exorcism. I believe this to be like a 5th stage of possession. Mm-hmm. Exorcism is the final confrontation between light and darkness. It is a war for the soul of the afflicted, where failure means total possession and victory is never guaranteed. The ritual is not a quick fix, nor is it a passive ceremony. It is an ordeal that tests the faith, endurance, and strength of everyone involved. Demons do not surrender without a fight. They resist, retaliate, and seek to break the exorcist before they are cast out. Before an exorcism can begin, the church must determine whether possession is genuine. Not every case of alleged demonic activity is legitimate. Many are the result, as we've said, as those psychological disorders, medical conditions, or extreme religious hysteria. But the church requires thorough investigations before granting permission. Priests consult doctors, psychiatrists, and religious scholars. The possessed individual is observed closely for signs that distinguish true possession from illness and must meet certain criteria. They must display knowledge they could not possibly have. They must speak in languages they have never studied or reveal private details about people they have never met. They must react violently to sacred objects, show extreme distress when exposed to a crucifix, prayer, or holy water. And their bodies must exhibit unnatural abilities such as extra human strength, violent contortions, or even levitation. If these signs are present, the church authorizes the exorcism. Now, the priest chosen to perform the ritual undergoes his or her own preparation. They fast and pray, strengthening themselves spiritually for the battle ahead. The exorcist must be in a state of grace and unwavering faith, because any weakness may be exploited by the demon. They gather the necessary tools for the ritual, which include the crucifix, holy water, relics of saints, and the sacred texts containing the prayers of exorcism. The room where the ritual will take place is blessed, and in some cases, protective prayers are recited to prevent the demon from influencing those nearby. Assistants are sometimes present, either fellow clergy or family members, to provide support and ensure that the possessed individual does not harm themselves or others. And the moment the priest steps into the room, the presence of the demon is undeniable. Some possessions are violent from the start. The afflicted individual thrashes, growls, spits, their body struggling against unseen forces. Others remain eerily still, watching in silence when the expressions that is not their own. The air in the room becomes thick, almost oppressive. Many who have witnessed an exorcism describe a feeling of dread that is impossible to explain. The priest raises the crucifix and begins the ritual. He calls upon divine authority, evoking the power of God to drive out the intruder. And the reaction is immediate. The possessed individual may scream, convulse, or lash out. Some collapse, only to rise again moments later, their faces contorted with rage. Others laugh in mockery, their voices shifting between multiple tones as if something else is speaking through them. But the exorcist does not back down. He recites the sacred prayers, repeating the invocations designed to weaken the entity's grip. The demon will resist, using every weapon at its disposal. It will hurl insults and obscenities, taunts the priest by revealing his personal sins and weaknesses. It will twist the body of the possessed into impossible positions, forcing them to move in ways that no human should be able to. They will speak in ancient languages, in a very deep and guttural voice completely unlike their own. My phone just did something very interesting. And there goes Shelley again. See, we have not had issues if we're talking about demonic possession tonight. What? Anyways. But others remain silent, their eyes burning with hatred as they endure the exorcist's command. And the priest demands that the demon reveal its name. In many religious traditions, knowing a demon's name grants power over it. Some demons refuse, resisting for hours, even days, before they are forced to speak. Others attempt to deceive, offering false names in an effort to mislead the exorcist. Once the true name is revealed, the exorcism intensifies. The priest calls the demon by name, commanding it to leave in the name of Christ. The body of the possessed jerks violently, and their screams grow louder, and the resistant more desperate. The temperature in the room will fluctuate. Some say it's unnaturally cold, while others report a very oppressive heat. And that foul odor, like sulfur or something rotting, fills the air. But the exorcist continues on, unfazed by this chaos. He presses forward, he strengthens his commands, and invokes the names that no demon can withstand. The breaking point can come suddenly. The possessed individual can collapse, their body stiff and unmoving. A final agonized scream is most reported, as it feels like it's being ripped from their throat, followed by complete silence. And some exorcists claim to have seen a shadowy figure vanish from the room in that moment. Though whether this is a manifestation of the demon's retreat or something else entirely, it is unknown. The silence lingers for what feels like an eternity before the afflicted individual exhales and becomes still. Now, in the moments that follow, the priest carefully observes that individual. Some wake immediately, others remain unconscious for hours or days. Many remember nothing of their possession. Some recall fragments. A final blessing is performed to ensure the demon does not return, and the individual is encouraged to strengthen their faith, surround themselves with spiritual protection, for demons are known to seek re-entry into those they once possessed. Now, not every exorcism ends in success. Some demons refuse to leave, requiring multiple sessions over weeks, months, or even years. Others return, finding new ways to worm their way back into the lives of those they tormented. And some individuals do not survive, their bodies unable to withstand the relentless battle within. And then there are those who escape possession, only to find that what happened to them has left an imprint that they cannot erase. And for the exorcist, the battle may be over, but the scars remain. For the victim, the ordeal may have ended, but the question lingers. Was it truly the demon that left, or did it simply back into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return? I feel like Shelley's having such a hard time tonight.
Yeah, she is. She is. So, did you, in your research, did you come across a case where maybe like a demon returned multiple times and they had to do the same exorcist over and over and over again to try to get rid of it?
You know, I actually haven't heard. I have not come across one like that yet. I've yet to stumble across a case where a full-blown possession and exorcism took place. The person was fine, and then they came back. Now, I may not be thinking of one off the top of my head, but in researching all this, like, no, I didn't come across it. I find that aspect really interesting. It's almost like once you're marked, like they can just come back and back, which makes sense, you know. Going back to a question we have in the comments about Marissa, they actually did not send her to the doctors. Just FYI. They just hold her up for 3 days and yeah. Well, demonic possession is more than a story whispered in the dark or a plot device for Hollywood horror. It is a phenomenon that has persisted across centuries, defying easy explanation and blurring lines between faith, psychology, and the supernatural. From the tormented souls of history to the chilling cases of today, one thing remains certain. Possession, whether real or imagined, has the power to consume, destroy, and leave those who witness it forever changed. For those who believe, the battle between good and evil is not fought on distant battlefields, but in the depths of the human soul. It is a silent war waged in bedrooms, hospitals, and churches where the stakes are nothing less than a person's very essence. Perhaps that most terrifying question of all is not whether demonic possession exists, but whether we would recognize it if it came for us. Would we see the signs, and would we resist? Or would we, like so many before us, slip into its grasp, unaware until it was far too late? That is demonic possession.
Well, that's a cheery way to end that one.
let me tell you what was going on. For the entire time whenever we were talking about exorcism, every bit of the audio from you on my side was garbled. I could not hear a single word you said, but anytime Ryan spoke, it came through completely clear. So I hopped out, I hopped back in. And again, I would get one or two words, and then you would be completely garbled from what I was hearing. And when Ryan spoke, completely clear. So I changed my switched over to data from Wi-Fi, came back on. Blake, you were still garbled. And the only thing I got was what was just your last part of the ending. And now you're completely clear. I can hear you just fine.
Shelley, let me ask you a question. Was your dad on the phone or talking in the background at all? Because I could have swore I heard a man talking several times.
There's somebody talking somewhere during. Yeah, it's got to be in the background though.
It probably is. I don't hear him, but that doesn't mean anything.
All right.
Yeah. So here's my question. Now, hearing everything that you've heard tonight, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Have you two ever experienced anything that resembles anything of what I spoke about tonight? Out in the field?
Well,
in your own personal lives. I mean, you don't have to say it if you don't want to.
Well, I've told the story on Patreon. I haven't told this like publicly. It's behind a paywall, but I'll tell you the story. So the encounter that I had, we lived in this house back in North Carolina, and the power had went out. I mean, it was the middle of an ice storm. I mean, pitch black everywhere. I mean, and so we were all kind of huddled in one room, and it was me, my mom, and my dad. And my sister went to go stay with my grandparents that night. Now, my dad had a previous encounter in that house where something tried to choke him while he was at home by himself. But my mom and my dad were going to church at the time. And we all went to bed, and my dad woke up with this excruciating toothache. And so my mom gave him some medicine, but my mom started to pray over my dad to ease the pain or whatever. And the only way I can describe to you the feeling in that room was kind of like that inky, sticky, nasty, oppressive, dark feeling you get like when you're at Yorktown, whatever that is around.
Yeah.
And my dad gets in the floor in the fetal position and starts snarling like a dog and starts walking on his knuckles towards my mother going, "You can't tell me what to do." Like, not his voice at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so my mom is praying over him, and she's like, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. You have to leave." And this, we're both like at this point, because he's like walking on his knuckles towards my mom. And like, it is just the weirdest, most heavy feeling I've ever felt in my life in this room. And this thing does leave, and the room gets instantly lighter, like the heaviness leaves. And that was the first encounter I've ever had with something like that. And it's not something I ever want to see again, because the way he contorted and the way I don't know, like, I can't really explain to you how that room felt other than Yorktownish is the best way I can explain it to you. It was fucking crazy. So that is my encounter with whatever that was.
Well, Shelley, if you feel like sharing, you don't have to, but I know it's kind of, some of this stuff can get kind of personal. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted, too.
I was like, wait, what?
I did not mute my mic.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so yeah, I've had a couple actually, and the most recent is Yorktown, which we've talked about,
Right.
where I was being told things that I didn't know about
Mhm.
people that were there.
Mhm.
And whenever I said them back to the people, they confirmed that the truths that he wanted me to say
Mhm.
actually did have some truth to them.
Some validity
Um,
to it. Yeah.
that's not the first time I've ever encountered him there. The other time he said a name that at the time you guys didn't even know about this particular incident with me
Mhm.
until
Mhm.
almost 6, 8 months later, said something very personal to me. And it it threw me off really bad because there was nobody in that building that night that knew that about me. Very personal, very emotional, and it decided to kind of just make me a target. It wanted me out, and that was the way to do it. And I've had some that I believe from when I was little, up to and including the dreams and the predicting of deaths,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
I've done that quite a few times, which I don't like that. So
Yeah, I found
um,
just to uh jump on what you were saying about that night that it happened to you at Yorktown. Yeah, when you got us on the phone and finally told us what was said, that was the
yeah.
first time I had ever heard anything of you saying,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna, it's
And
nobody's
that's
business
the
what it
night I
is,
wouldn't go
but
back in the building.
yeah.
That's the
Mhm.
night I was like,
Yeah.
and
And
it
that
drained
was,
me, and I went and laid down in the back of my car, and I said, I can't go back in there.
Mhm.
yeah. So I think the only thing that I've come close to anything resembling this is at Yorktown as well.
Mhm.
And I think that's why we finally decided to being like,
Right.
hey, yeah, that is what it is. Like, don't go
Right.
around
Yeah.
it. Don't go in there and fuck around in there because you are dealing with something very
Right.
malevolent, dark, and demonic.
Mhm.
We're calling it demonic. It's the only place that we go to that we would
And
classify
it
as
will do
demonic.
things to hurt you
Yes,
psychologically,
it will.
spiritually, mentally, and
Mhm.
physically.
But the night that we had one of our people completely taken over and
Mhm.
jumped for like four, I think she lost 45 minutes worth of time. And, and we had to have basically a mini, if you will, exorcism right there on the front lawn of the hospital. Like,
Right.
And
that's the
her eyes
closest I've
turned
ever got.
black, which we
Yeah,
Yeah.
all
completely.
witnessed.
Well, we
Yep.
got the picture of it too. So
Yeah.
Completely black. Yeah.
it's completely blocked over.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's all on video. Her being attacked is all on video, and we have the picture of her eyes completely blocked over. That was probably the closest I've ever. That moment changed my perspective
Mhm.
on how intense and quick it can happen.
Right. Right. And
So
that's what I'm saying. That like same feeling is the feeling I got when I had that first
yeah,
encounter. Like
yeah,
that's how
yeah.
you can tell when whatever that is around, you can feel that. And
But
it's
I will
yeah.
And
say,
you know
don't.
it when you feel it. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel like anything else you've
No.
ever encountered.
No, it
And
does not.
it is this kind of almost it's like this sticky kind of like
Mhm.
substance that like feels like it's just clinging to you and it's coating you. Think of like honey being poured over you, but not in the good way. And it's just kind of just coating you and you kind of can't escape it and it's constricting and it's like you can't just wipe it off.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's just like enveloping you.
yeah.
And it's not a
Yeah.
good feeling.
No.
I think it's interesting, like going back to like what I was discussing tonight in this presentation is that I think that a lot of people's views on what is possession is misconstrued through the lens of Hollywood. Obviously,
Yes.
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
Exorcist and all these the Conjuring series and stuff like that. It's not walking into Yorktown. It's not one of those that you would even think that there could be a demonic entity inside. But everything that happens in that place and everything that we've
Mhm.
experienced in that place leads you to believe that it is, because in
Right.
my opinion, that's what it is. But as well as like the infestation, basically what I'm getting at is what you see in Hollywood is not what possession
No.
actually is. This is something that takes time. On that same note, we've had a few people reach out to us and go, oh, I've got all this going on. Like, I need to have a priest out. And we're like, okay, let's kind of figure out what's happening in your house first.
Right.
It's not, I mean, if you feel you need a priest, go get a priest by all means. We're not here to stop you for that. If
Yeah,
that's
don't
what you
play with
feel,
it. If you think you need one, go get one.
go get one. But if you want us to come out and take a look, 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't even say less than that. I mean, more than that. 9.9 times out of 10 is not what you think. It's either you got a cranky ghost or
Mhm.
you've
Right.
got high EMF reading somewhere in the house that's making you feel a certain way or something like that.
Mhm.
I don't want everybody to leave this podcast tonight thinking that every infestation or sign of infestation is the beginning signs of a demonic possession.
Right.
The percentage of cases is less than 1% out of 10,000 that the Vatican hears about, basically on a yearly basis. So what are we talking about with that? I can't do simple math even. What is that?
I mean, it's a point it's a fraction of a percent at that point.
What is that, like 110? I don't know. Don't get me to do math.
We don't do
not good
math
at
on this show.
We don't do math.
Right.
We don't do math. It was the only B
Very
I made in
few.
school, and I
Yeah.
only went to algebra 2, and that was in 10th grade. So I haven't had math in, like, I don't know.
You made it farther
20
than I
years.
did with math.
I can't even do percentages. Okay, so leave me alone. That's why I do research. I'm an English major. But anyways, I just don't want everybody to think that, oh my God, I've got knocking, scratching, disembodied voices. I'm seeing things out of the corner of my eye, and poltergeist
Right.
activity. You know, it's I'm being possessed. My house is being possessed. That's not what we're saying.
It could just be a haunting.
It could just be a very active haunting. However,
Mhm.
just know that a lot of the signs that we talked about in the earlier part of this episode, I mean, are the beginning stages of demonic possession, but you have to look at the other things that are around it. Are you willingly playing in things? Are you unintentionally inviting things in by doing things that you shouldn't be doing, or you're buying things and bringing them home that you don't even realize could possibly have an attachment? You have to look at the whole broad picture. I don't want everybody leaving to shut up. I know. There's a Ouija board right up here that's alleged to be haunted. I've got 2 haunted dolls within this room. I've got my good old demon mask right here that sits behind me. So yeah, I mean, I buy things, but I also protect myself very well. If you're buying things willy-nilly and they're like, oh, that's a haunted doll, but you don't know how to protect yourself properly, you could be potentially inviting shit in that you don't even realize. So anyways, I find demonology, demonic possession, demons in general to be a fascinating subject, more along the lines of protect yourself from your enemy, so to speak. And I feel like somebody, at least in this group, needs to be versed in that department. We realize that we have Sal and Linda up in Oklahoma as part of our extended group, and we kind of do a lot with them, our sister group. And so they're our go-to ordained minister and Reiki healer that we've had on the podcast before. So I leave getting rid of it to them too. By all means, if it's in the building and they're like, Blake, get rid of it, I'm like, hold on 1 second, I got to make a call to Linda real fast. Like, I ain't messing with it. But anyway, so I don't know. I wanted to start delving into demons, demonology, and specifically demonic possession, which is why I kind of kicked the door open with that tonight. So,
perfect.
What are y'all's final thoughts
gentlemen?
on demonic possession?
I mean, like you were saying, like not every haunting is going to be a demonic haunting. Just be vigilant as to what's going on in your house or whatever's happening in your life. If you feel like something on the darker side is happening, go seek medical help first. Go see if see if what's going on with your mental state. But if you need to, reach out to someone who can actually come and help you if you feel like demons show up. So that's something.
Final thoughts?
I want to add on to Ryan's. We're not saying go get checked out medically to be funny or to say that you may be
right.
We're not trying to dismiss what could potentially be a haunting or a potential possession. But what's going to end up happening is if it goes that far, you're going to have that evaluation anyway.
Right.
So why not just beat it to the punch and go, listen, I've had my psych eval. I have this going on. Here's the document for this. Right. And here's what's happening. Please come help me.
And God forbid something like that is happening. You have a clean bill of health to show someone and be like, hey, look, I've gone through all these steps already. What's happening here?
Yeah. Exactly.
And
so I just wanted to tag that on.
Yeah, and my final thought is 99% of the time it's not going to be demonic. That should never be your first conclusion that you jump to. You should always look for a more earthbound reason a lot of times for some things, and then sometimes it's more of just a cranky spirit. But again, if you do start to see signs, and again, kind of worried me because Blake's checking off a lot of crap that goes on in my house. But I gotta tell you, I don't think even now, even with everything that I just heard him say, that's not my conclusion. Haunted, yes. Demonic haunting, no. So, and with that, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Okay, I will. I just have to say you're welcome, Linda, for tossing out the demonic cases to you. You're very welcome. Love you. All right. Don't forget seasons 1 through 3 of After Dark with EVP are streaming now on Paraflix Paranormal Plus, with season 4 filming soon and dropping sometime this spring. To watch Paraflix Paranormal Plus, you can look for it on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. You audio listeners, you can find that sign-up link in our show notes, but everybody can go to our Facebook and X profiles on Wednesday morning. Click that Linktree link for easy access to Paraflix, and don't forget to use our code AFTERDARK25 for 25% off your annual subscription. If you want to support the show directly, you can check out our Patreon page, which is also linked in our Linktree. It is just $5 a month, and you will instantly unlock over 450 Patreon-exclusive videos, including the pre- and post-broadcast shows, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this broadcast. Yes, we do 30 additional minutes on either side of this broadcast just for y'all. So, and that's where we get to act more goofy and talk about random crap. And yeah, you learn a lot more about us over there. Probably more than you would ever want to know. But if you're not sure about joining Patreon, you can try it risk-free with our 7-day free trial. Make sure you stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, many more by searching Everything Vaguely Paranormal and looking for that green sound wave, or by clicking those icons in the Linktree link. We are close to our next goal on YouTube. I believe we are under 40 away from hitting 1,000 subscribers. Y'all, if everyone could go over there and subscribe on YouTube, click that subscription button, we would greatly appreciate it, so we can start doing a lot more things with that channel. Right. We have so many plans. We just got to get to that 1,000 subscribers first.
Tell your mama, tell your cousin, tell whoever you got to tell.
Exactly. Don't forget, we are live every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. And if you would like to meet us in person, you do have a few choices. We will be at the Missouri Paracon February 28th through the March the 1st in Kansas City at the Ameristar Casino and Hotel. Later on this year, we will be at the Paranormal Rockdown at Broadhead Manor in Broadhead, Wisconsin on July 18th through the 19th. Then we are headed over to the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash from July 25th through the 27th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And finally, we'll be attending the Rock Island Roadhouse Esoteric Expo on October 4th in Rock Island, Illinois. And I believe now we have 3 or 4 more, not just 2, that we will be looking at possibly getting into. So
that we've received invites to, and we're trying to work them into the schedule.
Yes. No, more announcements will be coming on that, hopefully. Make sure to subscribe to our Eventbrite page as well, so that you can get tickets when our public investigation tickets do go on sale. We are starting to get ready to post those up for our 2025 investigation season, so don't miss out on those. We are grateful for your continued support. Every like, comment, share, and download keeps these adventures alive. So if you have a favorite episode, share it with your friends. Make sure you tag us. And if you have a story, comment, or question, or you'd like to have us on your show, you can email us at theevppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube channel, please.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, thank y'all so much for joining us for another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, I am Blake Smith. And I, on behalf of my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt, I've talked an entire episode. Get over it. Miss Shelley Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. As always, we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.